I stumbled upon a quote that went something like, try to turn your 10-year goal into a 6 months effort, or something along those lines. And when I tell you, I don't know why, but something shifted dramatically in my brain at that very moment as I was reading it. It was as if it sort of lift off a huge weight from my shoulder, because the type of endeavors and work that I've been doing has recently felt like a huge, big, giant dragon in front of me that I sort of don't know even how to tackle or maneuver. And the shift that this quote, I don't know how, made it in my mind was that I suddenly saw the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, because that giant dragon sort of shrunk in size, because it made me think that what if I did something like that, and what would I lose? Essentially, I would have nothing to lose if I did that. And it's not so much about the motivation that I needed. It was more of a perspective change that it sort of did, because the motivation, it's innate in me. I already have it, but it was that sort of shift of that perception. And that's something that I want to talk about. So for the past 12 years or so, I've been working on this notion of symbiotic intelligence. And I've been doing that along with my other day-to-day activities and work and whatnot. But essentially, I ended up completing that work and publishing it. And it turned out to be a huge, huge volume of over 600 pages of work and ideas and research and whatnot. And while I'm happy about me being able to get to the end line in terms of publishing it, what happened afterwards was a bit more daunting, in my opinion at least, because it's one thing to bring what you're working on, your research, and everything that goes with it, the literature review, etc., in one volume. But it's another thing to sort of keep up with it and know what to do with it afterwards. It's a little bit like when you go on a diet, and once you reach your weight and goal weight, and then after that it's a little bit sort of disorienting. It's like, okay, now what do I do? What's the calorie maintenance, for example, which is also a place where I'm at right now. And so what I'm trying to say is that it's a little bit of a different sort of mindset and mind shift that needed to happen. And one thing I noticed is that, okay, this volume is great, but it also feels a little bit more like a brain dump, that essentially everything that it was in my head over the past 12 years that I have been working on, and the literature review, I just dumped it in sort of one volume. But at that point, I'm like, okay, and the what? So what question comes in when, for example, you've been working on or striving towards doing something for a long period of time, and you get to the finish line and you finish it. That mindset that you needed in order to get to that point is a very specific one, but it's also a very different one in comparison to once you get to the finish line and it's like, okay, now what? Where do I go from here? And that mind shift, that mindset shift sort of at some point needs to happen, but also it needs to be quite different from what got you to that point, if that makes sense. And that quote, in terms of turn your 10-year goal into a 6 months effort and work, did that mind shift for me. And for you, it might be something different. It might be something you see or another thing you read and whatnot. But once that happens, that is when you sort of realize that it really is no longer about the motivation that you needed in order to get to the finish line, but for you to sort of reinvent yourself and work with what you have created but then have a goal towards where that leads you. And in my case, I thought I knew until I saw that quote last night. So I'm like, no, probably I didn't, because of the evidence that I have in terms of the staggering and the brain rot that sort of it brought with it once you go and finish what you set off to do, especially if it's been over a long period of time, such as another example is that if you lose weight and you're in calorie deficit, for example, and once you reach your goal, you need a different mindset to sort of go into maintenance. It's a very different personality type also that you need to. And so shifting the mindset from a 10-year plan or even 5-year plan into a 6 months of 6 months plan, that is where the personality shift is also is very important, because you can't really just get up and do it. You also need to look at what your environment embodies, because that environment also may need to be shifted in order for the 10-year to turn into a 6 months. But the bottom line is that once you do that, and I'm in the process of doing that, there are certain things that sort of become apparent. And one of the things is that I definitely need to get this more focused, get this body of work much more focused. And so now I'm working on a condensed version, which would be a second edition, where I am working on making this book into half a size, which would be 300 or maybe 350 pages, which is much more, I think, acceptable volume for a book. And it's easier said than done, so to speak, because every time I feel like I want to get rid of some parts or some chapters, I'm like, no, this also is very important. So it's a little bit of a hoarding effect that I have right now in terms of I don't want to get rid of everything. So that is a bit challenging, but I think that making that condensed version is also a representation of condensing time, going from 10 years in this case to 6 months, or maybe even a year, because 6 months might be a little bit exaggerated, I should say. And so the environmental change in here is that even the book that was the artifact of the work becomes half a size, which would also be a representation of the mind shift, the mindset change, and also the personality change trait that needs to be accomplished and needs to be had once the shift in goal settings changes this drastically. Another shift that I think should happen, at least for me, is to holding myself accountable much more than what I'm used to. In this case, changing the environment settings, making sure that I am in a position to actually make that drastic shift in terms of doing the things that I need to do and holding myself accountable also comes with that accountability, so to speak. And the accountability part somehow also shifts in terms of making the accountability checks much quicker and much faster and much more frequent than, for example, what I've done in the past. Let's say in the past, every month or so, I would get back to the goal settings and see whether I have achieved what I wanted to achieve or I did what I wanted to do. But in this case, maybe that accountability check needs to become daily because the time has shifted and shrunk and is condensed to such an extended period of time. And I think, at least for me, where I'm at right now, this is a very, very, very healthy exercise because that's exactly the type of medicine I needed. So I feel like this quote was really the medicine that I needed to get injected with, because it is as if it kind of also made my vision, which was just up until last night a bit blurry, but now it's much more I guess clearer. It's as if you get you up level your prescription glasses because it makes it much clearer. Or those people who are colorblind and they get these glasses and then they see the world differently. And so the shift that happens is also that you see the world differently. You see even the people differently, even the events differently. Let's say you're invited to go somewhere, and that shift also makes it so that you make that decision whether you should go or not, because now you know, instead of 10 years, you no longer have the 10 years. You actually only have 6 months or maybe a year if you don't want to go to that level of school. Of course, I can only talk about my own experience because that's all I know. You can translate it into how that translates in your life. And I know that majority of people really don't have lifelong goals, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's different. But the one part that I'm also decided to make this particular video is holding myself accountable for the things that I want to do and I want to achieve while I'm in this earth. And ironically, at the same time, more or less, that I saw this quote, a snippet of one of Joe Rogan's podcasts also came up on my feed, where he said, at best you have 80 summers or 80 years or 80 summers you're on this earth. And when I'm telling you, it really hit home when I heard him say summers and the number of summers to be finite. That was another huge shock and sort of kick in the butt that I needed, because for me, summers are the peak of every year. It's the only time during the year where I feel alive, I feel good, everything is just good. Doesn't matter what happens in my life, just because my mentality shifts. Like, I love the heat. And when he used the word summer, it really hit home for me, because that's like my thing. And then I thought to myself, well, it's not even 80, because the first 20 years doesn't count, and maybe the last 20 years doesn't count either, because of, maybe you're too young or too old. But it leaves us only with maybe 40 or 50 summers. And so when you think of it that way, it really is not much time. So turning the 10-year goal into 6 months, I think it really gives that urgency that some of us need, at least those of us who have grandiose goals in life, to at least make us feel sane during our day-to-day lives, that we're not wasting our time here. So one of the first steps, at least against on my end, it is definitely on your end, is to, first things first, my to-do list is to make this book much shorter. And also, it's really not about just going into deleting. I am reading the book again just to see the parts that really needs to be there, because they capture the gist of the work that I've been doing for the past 12 years, and also if I need to add anything to it. And so I've already done 1/3 of it, which is great. So I'm holding myself accountable. But the rest of it, it's the part that I really need to start thinking about. Okay, how have these work and research and notions evolved? What parts are maybe no longer needed? And what parts need to maybe be rewritten? And my goal is to, by next week, this time next week, I will have it done. So I'm holding myself accountable by making this video, and you are also holding me accountable by listening to this video. And if you accept the challenge, you can do your own thing as well, and maybe put one goal that you've been thinking about, and you needed that mindset shift to make things shift from having gotten to where you are today, but now you need to shift the mindset to where you need to go next. And you can also hold yourself accountable for this next week. And we can come back next week and sort of compare notes. In addition to this, there are other things that I need to do. And that is also the content creation. I need to be a bit better and also increase the frequency of my content creation in terms of the articles that I write to Medium, the articles that I write to LinkedIn, as well as the other small portion videos that I make for other streams that I am doing in addition to this. Because I think that increasing the frequency of what you're writing, it also helps. Up until now, I've done it maybe once every 2 weeks or so, but if I increase the frequency of that, that would also help with the shift in the type of activities that needs to be also accomplished and done. One last thing about shifting the 10-year into 6 months or a year is that once that is completed, at least on my end, the way I see it is that I will be able to reflect back in 6 months, which would be at the end of 2025. So let's say by Christmas 2025, Christmas this year, is to see whether what I did even counts for anything. And two things could happen, or maybe three. One is that, okay, this really didn't make much of a difference. I didn't make the accomplishment that I wanted to, so this style doesn't work for me. Second route, it could be that I see great results and I'm like, this is great, so I can continue with it, maybe take a breather in between. And the third thing might be that I just give up all in all, because this fast approach to addressing a goal that you're making is that during a very short amount of time, you'll be able to assess whether the goal and the thing that you wanted to do is even worth it. Because if you put everything into one thing and then afterwards you come back and there was no result, or you see that that was actually not a good idea at all, for whatever reason that you have found out during that 6 months, that is also an answer. So even no answer or a bad answer is a good answer, because last thing I want is to waste the rest of my life, and that is remaining, to some illusion or delusion that I have about something that I think should happen. What if I just go all in 6 months and just complete the work and see whether it's even worth it? Because if I realize that this is not worth it, I have then saved another 10 or 20 years of my life, because then I can just let it go. Which would be very, very heartbreaking, because I'm already extremely attached to this, because I've worked so hard for it and I believe in it so much. But if it turns out that it's a delusional effort and it's really not going to happen, or it's something that will never come into fruition because it's not practical even, or whatever the reason may be, then at least knowing that is better than not knowing. Okay, folks, that's all I had for today. If you have any goal as such, drop it down in the notes and let us know if you want to share. And I'll see you guys next week to hold each other accountable for our progresses. Thanks so much. See you next time. Bye.